Hey you guys, this video is long overdue, but I wanted to come on here and give you my commentary about why I think you should be more cautious about who you give your vote to for the upcoming election this year in 2020. This video took me a while because of the amount of research and stats that I searched for and making sure that the sources were reliable. So, with all of that being said, I want to go ahead and start off first with Joe Biden. And for those who don't know who he is, he was once President Barack Obama's vice president, and I believe that he was the senator of Delaware prior to his initial to his vice president commencement. So before he became the vice president for Barack Obama, that's what he was. I think that he was a senator of Delaware. I'm not entirely sure on that, but make sure you guys comment in the comment section if he was a senator or if he held a different governmental position besides that. But to keep the video as brief as possible, I'm going to be highlighting problematic statements or actions that each of these candidates have made and then offer commentary throughout the video. But I will save most of it for the end of the video. But just to get started, Joe Biden, he was at a speaking engagement or a discussion panel of some sort. And when he was asked his thoughts on the disparities and discrimination that Black children are subject to in education, he was initially hesitant in providing an answer as if he was unprepared for this scenario to be mentioned. And when he finally responded to this question, he deflected momentarily by discussing social workers and just kind of dancing around the question in general. His words were, look, there's institutional segregation in this country, so already this is telling you where he's going with his response. And it may be my familiarity with certain talking points, but when someone relegates an issue to an entire country, it diminishes the problems that a particular group of people are facing. It's similar to when Black people came up with Black Lives Matter and then the larger society came up with All Lives Matter. So automatically everything Black people were trying to say was swept under the rug with this slogan when we know all races of people are not under the same level of oppression as we are. But he further stated, and from the time I got involved, I started dealing with this redlining banks, making sure that they were in a position where, look, talk about education. I propose that what we take is those very poor schools, the Title I schools, triple the amount of money we spend. And he also went on to talk about how teachers face debilitating pressures from students with the problems that the students bring to them from home. But Joe, teachers assume this role because they are the problem solver. So what are you talking about? Anytime a student is presented with an issue or a situation that a teacher is supposed to be trained and educated in, especially learning how to bring about a resolution to that child's situation, that's why it's a little bit weird why he made that statement, just because when you think about it, a teacher is supposed to be essentially a person that solves problems for students whenever they bring them any kind of an issue or a scenario that they can't handle ordinarily by themselves. So that was a little bit questionable. And one of the things that I also want to mention is the fact that whenever we actually have situations, because you don't want to overstep boundaries, especially in the case of home issues, like whenever a Black student is facing issues at home, you certainly don't want to overstep certain boundaries. Teachers should have the wherewithal to help from a neutral stance without impeding in a student's personal life unless given permission to do so. So unless like a parent gives you permission to actually overstep certain boundaries, then you really shouldn't. You should be able to have an alternative or some kind of a solution as to how to deal with a situation whenever a student comes to you about something. And see, he didn't stop there. He also stated that we have to make sure every single child does, in fact, have 3, 4, or 5-year-olds going to school, not daycare, school. And we bring social workers into homes and parents to help them deal with how to raise their children. It's not that they don't want to help, they don't know quite what to do. Play the radio, make sure the record player is kept on at night. So it's an odd statement. Immediately after he said that, he was met with instant backlash, and rightfully so, because by him saying this, it gives off the impression that black parents don't know how to raise their children. And if you guys don't know, this rhetoric is a typical white supremacist level talking point that has been debunked numerous times. And this is, there's no substantial proof that the inequities black children face are somehow tied to what they watch and see on television. And I want to say that this is extremely similar to when people use that same tired and cliche talking point when they talk about black children growing up to be rebellious. And it's because of single parent households. I mean, I'm sure that you guys have heard that numerous times where they will try to equate the behavior of black children or teenagers or what have you to being raised in a single parent household. And if you think about it, that actually makes no sense, because it is highly likely that there's going to come a point in your life where you're going to learn to be obedient or adhere to an authoritative figure. This can be in the form of a teacher, it can be a coach, it can even be your supervisor, but eventually you get used to it. You become used to submitting to someone who is like in some kind of a form of a leadership role. So Joe Biden, he did get dragged for that comment. A lot of black parents actually were insulted by this because it gave them the impression that they were incompetent in their parenting style. It made them seem as though they were incapable of raising their children with the proper disciplinary comportment in terms of how to conduct themselves in society. But one thing that we can say is that children from the dominant society typically emulate what they see on television. I mean, that's something that is definitely true on their side, in my opinion, because when you think about it, they're the ones who are more likely to contribute to the crime stats the most. Now, we know that it is not unheard of for crime stats to be skewed in favor of making white look like they hardly ever commit crimes, if ever at all. But think about this too. Do you guys know how people always refer to black on black crime, for example? Why is it that, I mean, of course, obviously it is a real thing. I'm not trying to say that it isn't. You know, obviously we know that it exists, but why does it seem like that with white on white crime? Why is that never discussed? Or Asian on Asian crime? I guess these other communities are just so pure and perfect that there's no need to mention those stats are there, right? So we don't need to talk about school shootings or white women taking their husband's life to collect life insurance. I know y'all watch ID Investigate channel. I'm not the only one. And we can't forget about cases like with Peter Liang, the Asian police officer who murdered Akai Gurley, a young 28-year-old black man. So I guess we can, in essence, pick and choose communities that are highlighted in terms of crime, but why do that when the black community is the go-to community? Black on black crime just makes for a better story, right? And just moving on. Okay, so let's just go ahead and go with the next one. Okay, so Mike Bloomberg. Just a quick question. I have to know, how many of you guys have been seeing constant advertisements from this guy? I mean, every time I switch to another YouTube video, I see this man at least once between switching and right now. That ad-free membership on YouTube is not sounding like a bad idea if it means I don't have to see that man's face every 5 seconds. And he's just as problematic as Biden is for stop and frisk policies. Now, he is the mayor of New York City, and he had given a speech to black members of a church telling them that he was wrong for implementing policies that adversely affect black people, the most with discriminatory practices, which is a stop and frisk policy. Now, obviously, we know that police target black people the most anyways, but this only exacerbated their efforts to do so. And you guys already know how corrupt the NYPD is anyway. So just imagine their corrupt, gross hands when they found out they could stop and frisk individuals at random. And if you guys don't know what this policy is, it basically allows for police officers to search a person that they suspect is complicit in some sort of like a criminal activity, or if an individual is carrying a weapon. If to my understanding, during the year of 2011, a record number, which was about 685,000 cases of this occurred, which is excessively high, like within just a single year, it means that they had to catch multiple people a day during this every single day for the entire year. And even the New York Civil Liberties Union had revealed research that Black people who live in New York City were responsible for 54% of the statistic, which is staggering. So Bloomberg went on to apologize for this now, of course, because he realized that it was such a devastating policy. It wasn't until 2013 that a federal judge had actually ruled that the policy was too harsh and sought modification to lessen the impact of this egregious rule. And here's why you guys need to be careful of Mike Bloomberg, and I say this very cautiously. When the federal judge had stated that this policy needed to be reformed, he actually doubled down by asking, what does the judge know about law enforcement? And he wanted to fight for the rule to remain that way because it was meaning that more Black people would have been subject to stop and frisk policies. And I think he's only apologetic now because he wants to do damage control and clean his image so that he appears to be veracious and unvarnished. The contemptuous and deplorable testimony, of course, did not stop there. He also stated that during this time his intentions were on saving lives, and good intentions aren't good enough. And he said for too many people were being stopped, particularly Black people being the majority. So the reason why I feel like that this is some BS, obviously, because he wants the Black vote, and as we all know in our community, it unfortunately doesn't take much to get our vote. As long as you have some hot sauce in your bag, maybe do a fist bump if you can dance. Oh, and if you can nay, you definitely have the Black vote. You see, our community is very emotionally symbolic when it comes to making decisions. We either make decisions based on our emotions or because we see the symbolism in things without really vetting a person to determine their true intentions. And sure, these people can apologize and do all of what I just said, but how can we be sure that these politicians will deliver on what they say they're going to do for our community? Just look at the state of our community and think logically before you answer my next question. Other than segregation, which allows us to be in the same spaces as our oppressors without discrimination, has anything really changed for our community? Do we have our own economic structure? Do we have our own hospitals? Do we have health insurance companies or programs that specifically benefit Black people? If the answer is no, then that basically means nothing has changed for our community except the false illusion that we're somehow better off than we were pre-civil rights era. So do I buy Mike Bloomberg's BS apology and his BS excuse for why he not only implemented that law but then had the nerve to double down on it? No. And I suggest you guys take that into consideration before going out to vote. So with that being said, you guys feeling the burn yet? Bernie Sanders, yes, Bernie Sanders, the man who has opposed reparations for Black people on more than one instance. Let's go ahead and get into why he's also someone you should be cautious of. Now, I actually have another question for you guys. Okay, so Bernie has stated on several occasions how he marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and all that jazz, and we refer to him as some honorary activist on behalf of the Black community. Okay. So if that's the case, why does a man some Black people love so much, always in favor of denying reparations, which essentially has the potential to elevate the Black community beyond its current state? Oh, don't worry, I'll answer this one for you because you probably can't answer that one right away. So here's the thing. You see, Bernie may be brave enough to speak symbolically on behalf of the Black community, but he's not going to do something that could potentially, and listen closely, disrupt the system he benefits from as well. You see, one thing you guys have to understand, and I want you to hear me very closely on this, white supremacy nor systemic oppression can survive without the plight of Black people. It's the reason why Black people seemingly cannot rise above their current state, because if we're to use a metaphor to compare the current situation that we're in, it would be like a giant table which represents white supremacy sitting heavily on the backs of all Black people. So if you use that metaphor, that in essence represents the current state that we're in. We certainly can't overcome it if there is this large object that's weighing heavy on our backs, like Atlas when he holds the world up on his shoulder. So if we had received a large substantial fortune in the form of liquid cash or money, it has the potential to create an uprising. Black people no longer would need to depend on their system, and this would adversely affect Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders may be an honorary black to some of you, but he still realizes this, that at the end of the day, his whiteness grants him the privileges that are a result of your continued oppression. And see, my problem with him is that not only the reparations denial, but the pandering. This has been something that constantly gets on my nerve because I don't like when politicians pander. It's not genuine. And I feel like that they do that because they understand that the black community is very symbolically driven. They know that you can only do very little to gain our vote and will just go out and just tell everybody to vote for that politician. And I really don't like that. I feel like that they insult our intelligence by doing that. But this is what I talk about when I'm referring to the symbolism prospect of this. When black people vote for someone, they look to see who they can identify with in terms of a certain similarity. This can be verbal, it can be visual. For example, Hillary Clinton saying hot sauce in her bag, or Bernie Sanders saying he marched with Martin Luther King. And these are examples of symbolism. They aren't actual promises as far as what they can do to better our community, because in reality, they don't intend to actually better the community. They intend to sell you a false hope to gain your vote and leave you high and dry. And foolishly, I feel like that we fall for it every single time. And I just look on and disgust because I really don't see how it is that we still have yet to understand that we contribute to our own problems. And let me explain to you what I mean by this. If protesting doesn't work, if voting doesn't work, any form of civil disobedience, then why do we still continue to engage in the same practice? Something should tell you to try a new approach. If the same one isn't working, we've been protesting for a multitude of different things since the civil rights era, and almost nothing has changed except segregation, which was the most disastrous thing that's happened to us because now at this point it's irreversible. And lastly, we have good old sorry, I can't even pronounce his name correctly. We have good old Peter Buttigieg, a mayor from South Bend, Indiana. If you guys were to ask the black citizens from South Bend, Indiana, their thoughts on Buttigieg, they would be unfavorable. A young black man, I don't know if you guys know this, by the name of Eric Logan had his life tragically taken away at the hands of a white police officer, Ryan O'Neal. And coincidentally, Ryan O'Neal's body cam was off during the incident that occurred. Sounds a little bit like a bit of serendipity, right? Anyways, black voters wanted to know his thoughts on the situation, if they were to vote for him. One black woman asked his thoughts on it, to which he replied that he did not ask for her vote. And I'm pretty sure you guys some of you are probably shocked by that, but yeah, he clearly said, ma'am, I did not ask for your vote. Cold, ruthless, and entitled response. Sure, he probably thinks that he's going to win without the black vote because according to his logic, it's not expected of you to vote for him, black people, according to him. So with this response, he's showing you already he's too good for your vote. Definitely doesn't need it. I mean, are you still going to vote for him? That's kind of one of the things that I want to know. So to do damage control, Buttigieg's team had released a statement basically saying that Pete has spent years building and fostering a diverse coalition, including leaders in the city's black community and other minority communities, faith leaders, small business owners, and this mayoral administration to tackle systemic inequality and distrust in the city. Blah, 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 blah. So basically more of the same, generalized response. Each time these politicians have a sketchy or questionable past, it's always oh, he's not racist. Oh, he or she didn't know any better and they were ignorant to the issues initially but have since entered into a reform state. blah, 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 blah. My thing is this: are black people so gullible to buy into this that we overlook common sense and logic to see that putting our trust in these politicians works against us in the worst way? And then we wonder why things never change for our community. Now, I say all of this to say that I definitely don't like Trump, because I know where some of you are probably going with this. I don't like Trump by any means. But my thing is this: I actually don't like any of these politicians, because not once have I heard any of them say that they were going to do anything to help us with the systemic issues that we face and then follow through with it. And I'm well aware of the fact that black people are symbolically driven to vote with their emotions and what they perceive to be a win through symbolism, meaning that if a candidate proposes an idea but it's filled with supposition, the black person will still vote for that candidate because they think the politician can't solve a crisis within 4 years. So we vote for them again and still nothing has changed. And this repetitious cycle has continued for the past 150 years since black people have been allowed to vote. And it's just so tiresome and gruesome, and it just is so repetitive, and I'm tired of it. It's redundant. And at what point do you stop and say, you know what, maybe voting isn't the solution for our community to improve? Or perhaps maybe we see benefit in bashing our heads against the wall with no beneficial results. I don't know. One thing I wish to abstain from hearing and choosing choosing the lesser of two evils. I don't know if you guys have heard this talking point before, but it just gets kind of tiresome, and it's really annoying to hear this. Well, make sure you get out there and vote because you don't want, make sure you pick the lesser of two evils. No, 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 no. We don't need to choose a lesser of two evils. In fact, you also have the right to not even vote at all, because in case you haven't noticed, where has that gotten us so far? And I just get tired of always hearing these regurgitated talking points where it seems like that it basically forces us to not have any kind of choice at all. And one thing I have to constantly remind everybody in the community of is, no matter who you vote for, you're going to vote for your oppressor regardless. Because one thing that you guys have to understand is the people that actually are at the top, they practice white supremacy. They adhere to it to a fault. And it's sad to say, but they're not going to elect any kind of candidate into their office without making sure that that candidate is complicit in their agenda as well. So understand that the powers that be will not even consider that. And that's something that I think that we have to really understand, is that they're not going to accept anybody in the office unless they know that they have 100% control over who it is that they actually allow to come into office. Don't let anyone guilt you into voting and saying things like, oh, if you don't vote, your ancestors would be disappointed because they died fighting for this right for you to do so. No, my ancestors were murdered and killed by people who were merciless and malevolent with malicious intent in nature, and saw our people as subhuman. And these talking points, again, like I said, they're cliche and tired, and it gets so annoying that at a certain point I just walk away. I walk away at the sound of it, because I cannot tell you guys how many times I've had to debunk this over and over. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not independent. I just simply don't believe in the bipartisan or political system at all, because it does not benefit my people collectively. And I have no faith that it ever will benefit us. So there's literally no benefits to this. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's going to be people who will comment and come on the video and say, well, here's some benefit. Collectively, you guys, we have to look at we have to look at how these candidates view our people, especially in the past, because they can apologize now, but you have to really think about how it is that they conducted themselves in the past, because I can guarantee you the way they conducted themselves in the past is really how they feel about us. We can't go based off what they say now by apologizing or pretend to actually be for our people. So I choose to invest in us, because I feel like that obviously we are the only ones that can really solve our own problems. Anyway, with that being said, make sure you guys get in the comments section and let me know your opinion on this. Do you think that any of these politicians will be able to save black people from their current problems, or do you believe that our only hope is literally ourselves because we're all we have? So make sure you guys comment, like, subscribe, and share the video, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.